Please, sir, give our puppy something to eat. Mom is still sick. But what the human did next? The alley stank of piss and desperation. Jared Blackwood had smelled worse, but not by much. His boots crunched over broken glass as he cut through this shortcut, eager to get back to his cramped apartment before curfew. The magistrate's enforcers didn't take kindly to humans wandering after dark, especially in this part of Port Nexus. 15 years stranded on this godforsaken rock had taught him to keep his head down, stay invisible, take the jobs that kept credits flowing, no matter how dirty. The weight of his blaster pressed against his thigh beneath his battered combat armor, a relic from his days in the Earth Defense Force, before the wormhole collapse that stranded the 82nd Battalion on this alien hellhole. A soft whimper stopped him cold. Jared's hand instinctively moved to his weapon. In these streets, even the most pitiful sounds could be bait for an ambush. The Krell gangs were particularly fond of using children as lures. His eyes narrowed, scanning the shadows until he spotted them. Huddled against a crumbling wall, beneath the flickering glow of a malfunctioning street lamp. 3 Lyrellian females and what appeared to be a small pet. The sight was jarring. Lyrellians rarely ventured into the human quarter. The woman lay motionless on a flattened piece of cardboard, her lavender skin ashen and dull. Even in the poor light, Jared could see the fever sweat glistening on her brow, plastering strands of silvery white hair to her face. Her chest barely moved with each shallow breath. Beside her, 2 girls, one nearly grown, the other still a child, clung to each other. The older one's eyes found his, large and impossibly blue against her lavender skin. At her feet, a small creature that resembled a dog with azure fur and oversized ears trembled pathetically. Please, sir, the older girl whispered, her voice melodic even in desperation. Give our puppy something to eat. Our mama is still sick. Something twisted in Jared's chest. An unwelcome feeling he'd spent years burying under layers of indifference. The younger girl stared at him with those same haunting blue eyes, hope and fear battling across her delicate features. Not my problem, he muttered, but his feet refused to move. The older girl's face fell. I understand, she said softly. We've asked too much. Jared cursed under his breath. 15 years of survival instincts screamed at him to walk away. Getting involved with aliens, especially Lyrellians, was asking for trouble. They were considered property on this world, escaped from somewhere, no doubt. Helping them could cost him everything, yet he found himself kneeling beside the trembling creature, reaching into his pocket for the protein bar he'd been saving for dinner. What's wrong with your mother? He asked gruffly, breaking off a piece of the bar for the animal. Nexus fever, the older girl replied. 3rd wave. We had medicine, but it was stolen yesterday. Jared glanced at the woman. Nexus fever was a nasty business, fatal without treatment. Humans were immune, but it ravaged most other species. What's your name? He asked, surprising himself. Ermina, the older girl answered. This is my sister Morella, our mother Linnea, and our pet Cobalt. The little blue creature cautiously took the food from Jared's palm, its large eyes never leaving his face. I'm Jared, he said, then immediately regretted the admission. Names created connections. Connections created vulnerabilities. Thank you for your kindness, Jared, Ermina said, her voice carrying a dignity that seemed incongruous with their surroundings. He stood abruptly, uncomfortable with her gratitude. You can't stay here. The night patrols will be through soon. We have nowhere else to go, Ermina said simply. Jared looked down the alley, then back at the family. The woman, Linnea, wouldn't last another night without medicine. And if the patrols found them, damn it all, he muttered, making a decision that defied 15 years of careful survival. I have a place. It's not much, but it's better than this. As he bent to lift the unconscious woman, her skin burning against his, Jared knew his life was about to change forever. What he didn't know was just how much. Jared's apartment was a testament to 15 years of survival, sparse, functional, and fortified. The reinforced door slid shut behind them with a reassuring hiss as he carried Linnea to his bed, her weight surprisingly light in his arms. Her fever burned through his armor, and her silver hair cascaded over his forearm like liquid moonlight. Water's in the dispenser. Bathrooms there, he instructed the girls, nodding toward the small kitchenette. Lock's biometric. Don't answer if anyone knocks. Ermina nodded, her eyes taking in the compact living space. The weapons rack, the surveillance monitors, the escape hatch disguised as a maintenance panel. This wasn't just an apartment, it was a bunker. "You've been preparing for something," she observed quietly. Jared grunted as he laid Linnea on his bed. "Just practical. Port Nexus isn't known for its hospitality." He rummaged through a metal footlocker and pulled out a med kit. "I've got some broad-spectrum antivirals. Might help with the fever." Morella had settled in a corner with Cobalt, feeding the creature small bits of the protein bars Jared had tossed her way. The younger girl's eyes never left her mother. "You're taking a risk for strangers," Ermina said, helping Jared prepare the injection. "Why?" A fair question, one he'd been asking himself since the alley. "Damned if I know," he muttered, swabbing Linnea's arm with antiseptic. As he administered the injection, his fingers brushed against her skin, and he was struck by its texture, like warm silk over steel. "She's strong," he said, more to himself than to Ermina. "Nexus fever would have killed most 3 days ago." "Mother is not most," Ermina replied with a hint of pride. As if responding to their conversation, Linnea stirred, her eyelids fluttering. When they opened, Jared found himself staring into eyes of the deepest blue he'd ever seen. Like the oceans of Earth he'd thought he'd forgotten. "Where?" Her voice was hoarse but melodic, carrying an accent he couldn't place. "Save. For now," Jared answered, suddenly aware of how close he was sitting to her. "I'm Jared. Your daughter's asked for help." Recognition flickered across her features. "The human." She tried to sit up but winced. "Easy," he cautioned, placing a hand on her shoulder. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through him. "Nexus fever's no joke." "I know exactly what Nexus fever is," she replied, a strange edge to her voice. Her gaze shifted to her daughters, softening instantly. "You're unharmed?" Both girls nodded, relief evident on their faces. "The medicine will help," Jared said, packing away the med kit. "But you need rest." "We've imposed enough," Linnea said, attempting dignity despite her condition. "Once I can stand—" "You'll what? Head back to the streets?" Jared scoffed. "The patrols would have you in holding cells before morning." Something passed between Linnea and Ermina, a look laden with meaning. "We're grateful for your assistance," Linnea said carefully, "but our presence puts you at risk." "I'm already at risk. Human on a consortium world? I'm one infraction away from the labor camps." He shrugged. "Might as well make it count." That earned him the ghost of a smile, transforming her face in a way that caught him off guard. Even fever-ravaged, there was something striking about her, an elegance that transcended her ragged clothing in desperate circumstances. "The girls need sleep," Jared said, breaking the moment. "They can take the couch. I'll keep watch." Hours passed. The girls slept curled together like kittens, Cobalt nestled between them. Jared sat cleaning his weapons, one eye on the surveillance feeds, when he sensed movement from the bed. Linnea was watching him, her fever seemingly broken. The moonlight from his single window painted her lavender skin with silver highlights. "Your medicine worked quickly," she observed. "Military grade. One of the perks of my less respectable jobs." She studied him with unsettling intensity. "You were a soldier." "Lifetime ago. Yet you still carry yourself as one." She sat up slowly, testing her strength. "Why help us, soldier? Lyrellians are nothing to humans here." "Maybe I'm not like most humans." "No," she agreed, her gaze traveling over his face. "I don't believe you are." He felt exposed under her scrutiny, as if she could see past his carefully constructed walls. It was, unsettling and strangely exhilarating. "You should rest, Marith," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "I've rested enough." She swung her legs over the side of the bed, the movement causing her dress to ride up, revealing more of her lavender skin. "Tell me, Jared of Earth, do you know what the magistrate does to humans who harbor Lyrellian fugitives?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "Fugitives?" he asked, setting down his weapon. "From what?" Her smile was both sad and knowing. "Not what, who?" She reached up, brushing back her silver hair to reveal a small mark behind her ear, a symbol he recognized with a jolt of shock. "You're a healer," he breathed, "from the Temple of Vesh." I was, she corrected, until I learned what they were really doing there. Jared felt the ground shift beneath him. The Temple of Vesh was untouchable, the medical and scientific arm of the consortium's ruling elite. If she was running from them, "You've just complicated my life considerably," he said, but there was no real anger in his tone. "Yes," she agreed, meeting his eyes, "and I suspect I'm about to complicate it further." The air between them seemed to charge with electricity as she held his gaze, something unspoken but unmistakable passing between them. For the first time in years, Jared felt truly alive and in terrible danger. The warning came at 0300 hours, a silent alert on Jared's security system. 6 figures in magistrate uniforms approaching his building, moving with the practiced precision of hunters rather than the casual swagger of regular patrols. "We've been compromised," Jared said, already moving. He tossed Lanaya a pack. "Essentials only, 30 seconds. To their credit, the Lorellians asked no questions. Ermina gathered Mirella and Cobalt while Lanaya, now steady on her feet, helped Jared access the hidden compartment where he kept his emergency supplies. "How did they find him?" Linnea whispered, her breath warm against his ear as they worked side by side. "Questions later," Jared replied, though he had suspicions. He'd been careful, but the temple had resources beyond imagination. He slid back the false panel beneath his kitchen unit, revealing a narrow passage that connected to Port Nexus's ancient maintenance tunnels, a labyrinth of forgotten corridors that predated consortium occupation. "This leads to the lower levels," he explained, handing out light sticks. "Stay close. These tunnels can be unpredictable." The sound of boots in the corridor outside spurred them into the passage. Jared sealed it behind them, just as the first impact struck his apartment door. The tunnels were damp and claustrophobic, reeking of mold and decay. Jared led them through the darkness with practiced ease, his military training evident in every silent step and cautious turn. Behind him, Lanaya moved with similar grace, while Ermina helped Mirella navigate the uneven terrain. Cobalt padded silently beside them, no longer the trembling creature from the alley. After 20 minutes of tense progress, Jared called a halt in a small junction chamber. Ancient pipes gurgled overhead, providing white noise that would mask their conversation. "They found us too quickly," he said, checking his weapon. "That wasn't random." Lanaya's expression tightened. "I feared this might happen. The temple doesn't just heal, it enhances, and it tracks what it creates." She pushed back her sleeve, revealing a faint, luminescent pattern beneath her skin. Geometric shapes that pulsed with her heartbeat. "Genetic modifications," she explained. "All healers receive them. They amplify our natural abilities, but they also serve as markers." Jared stared at the glowing pattern. "You're tagged." "Not exactly. The modifications themselves emit a unique energy signature, undetectable by standard means, but the temple has specialized equipment." "That's how they tracked you to my apartment." She nodded grimly. "I've been developing a countermeasure, but I need equipment, specific compounds that I couldn't access while fleeing." "What kind of healer needs countermeasures against their own people?" Jared asked, the pieces still not fitting together. Lanaya's eyes met his and he saw something there, a depth of pain and determination that resonated with his own buried wounds. "The kind who discovered her people were experimenting on humans," she said quietly. "Creating weapons from your genetic material. Your species has remarkable adaptive capabilities. Did you know that? Qualities the consortium covets." The revelation hit Jared like a physical blow. "Human test subjects? Captured soldiers mostly, from your 82nd Battalion." His battalion, his brothers and sisters in arms, whom he'd believed lost in the wormhole collapse. A cold fury settled in his chest. "You have proof?" "Better. I have the research, encrypted and hidden in a secure facility. Research that could expose the temple and potentially reverse the modifications. Not just mine, but those they forced on their test subjects." Jared processed this, tactical assessments running through his mind. "This facility, heavily guarded, I assume?" A ghost of a smile touched Linaya's lips. "Naturally, but I know its weaknesses. I designed some of its security protocols." Their eyes locked, and something electric passed between them, a shared purpose forged in the damp darkness of the tunnels. Without thinking, Jared reached out, his fingers tracing the glowing pattern on her arm. Her skin was warm, vibrant with life despite all she'd endured. "Why risk everything for humans?" he asked softly. "We're nothing to the consortium." "Perhaps to the consortium," she replied, her hand covering his, keeping it against her skin. "But not to me." The air between them thickened with unspoken tension. Jared became acutely aware of how close they stood, of the subtle scent of her, like night-blooming flowers and something uniquely her own. His thumb brushed against her wrist, feeling her pulse quicken. "Mom?" Ermina's voice broke the moment. "I hear something." Jared reluctantly pulled away, his senses immediately sharpening. A faint mechanical whirring echoed through the tunnels. Seeker drones. "They're sweeping the maintenance level," he said, checking his tactical display. "We need to move deeper." "The old transit system," Linnaeus suggested. "It connects to the research district." Jared raised an eyebrow. "You've been in these tunnels before." "I've planned this escape for months," she admitted. "It's just not with company." Their eyes met again, and despite the danger, Jared felt a smile tug at his lips. "Having second thoughts about your rescue party?" "On the contrary," she replied, her voice dropping to a husky whisper that sent heat through his veins. "I find your tactical expertise quite valuable." The double meaning wasn't lost on him, nor was the way her gaze lingered on his mouth before she turned to help her daughters prepare to move. As they continued deeper into the tunnels, Jared found himself hyper-aware of Linnaeus' presence beside him. The occasional brush of her arm against his, the quiet strength in her movements. She was unlike any woman, human or alien, he'd ever encountered, and for the first time in 15 years of exile, he felt something dangerous taking root in his chest. Hope. The whirring of seeker drones grew louder, echoing through the damp tunnels like mechanical insects. Jared pressed his back against the cold wall, signaling the others to remain still as a drone passed overhead, its scanning beam sweeping the corridor. "They're getting closer," he whispered once it moved on, "and they're using a search pattern. They know we're down here." Linnea's face was illuminated by the faint blue glow of her genetic modifications, which seemed to pulse more intensely with each passing minute. "It's me they're tracking," she said, studying her arms with clinical detachment. "The energy signature is growing stronger, a defense mechanism. My body thinks it's under attack." Jared checked his tactical display. "We're still 2 sectors from the transit hub. At this rate, they'll have us cornered before we get there." A tense silence fell over the group. Morella clutched Cobalt to her chest, the creature sensing her fear and remaining unusually quiet. Ermina stood protectively near her sister, but her eyes revealed her understanding of their precarious situation. "There's another option," Linnaeus said finally. "Your medkit contains a neural inhibitor, doesn't it? Military grade." Jared nodded slowly, already seeing where she was heading. "It would suppress your neural activity, including the modifications." "Temporarily," she agreed. "Long enough to throw them off our trail." "It's designed for humans," he countered. "The dosage for Lyrellian physiology." "I'm a healer," she reminded him with a tight smile. "I know the conversion rates." Their eyes locked in silent communication. The inhibitor was risky, potentially fatal if miscalculated, but the alternatives were worse. "Do it," she said softly. Jared prepared the injection with practiced efficiency, though his hands weren't as steady as he would have liked. Linnea sat with her back against the tunnel wall, her daughters hovering anxiously nearby. "This will hurt," he warned, positioning the injector against her neck. "I've endured worse," she replied, her eyes never leaving his. There was trust there, trust he wasn't sure he deserved. The inhibitor hissed as it delivered its payload. Linnea's body went rigid, her back arching as the drug flooded her system. Jared caught her before she could hit her head against the wall, cradling her against his chest as she fought through the initial shock. "Mom!" Ermina moved forward, but Jared shook his head. "Give her a minute. Her body needs to adjust." Gradually, the luminescent patterns beneath Linnea's skin dimmed, then faded entirely. Her breathing steadied, and she opened her eyes, finding Jared's face inches from her own. "Well," she whispered, her voice husky, "that was invigorating." Despite everything, Jared felt a smile tug at his lips. That's one word for it. Their faces were close, Too close for comfort, yet not close enough. For a heartbeat, the danger around them seemed to recede, leaving only this moment, to this connection that defied explanation. Linaya's hand came up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the scar that ran along his jawline. "Thank you," she said simply. The moment broke as another drone passed overhead, its sensor sweeping uselessly now that Linaya's signature was suppressed. "We should move," Jared said, helping her to her feet. "The inhibitor won't last forever." They made their way through the labyrinthine tunnels with renewed urgency, the absence of pursuing drones a temporary reprieve. After nearly an hour of careful navigation, they emerged into a vast, forgotten space, the abandoned transit hub that once connected Port Nexus's various districts. Ancient transport pods hung from rusted rails overhead, while crumbling platforms stretched into darkness. The air was stale but breathable and significantly warmer than the tunnels. "We need to cross to the eastern platform," Linaya said, pointing to a distant walkway. "There's a maintenance shaft that leads directly to the research district." As they moved cautiously across the hub's main concourse, a guttural voice called out from the shadows. "That's far enough, warm bloods." Jared's weapon was in his hand instantly, trained on the source of the voice. From behind a toppled information kiosk emerged three Krell, reptilian humanoids with scaled skin and elongated skulls. The largest one, clearly their leader, sported an impressive collection of scars and a crude mechanical augmentation where his left arm should have been. "This is Krell territory," the leader hissed, yellow eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Passage requires compensation." "We're just passing through," Jared replied evenly, weapon still raised. "No need for trouble." The Krell leader's tongue flicked out, tasting the air. "I smell a healer," he said, his gaze fixing on Linaya. "Valuable commodity." "She's under my protection," Jared stated, his voice dropping to a dangerous register that made even the Krell pause. The standoff might have escalated if not for a pained groan from behind the kiosk. The Krell leader's demeanor shifted subtly, his eyes darting back toward the sound. "Your friend sounds like he needs help," Linaya observed carefully. "Not your concern, healer." "It could be," she countered. "I sense extensive internal bleeding. Toxicity. He won't last the night without treatment." The Krell's expression was unreadable to most, but Jared recognized the calculation happening behind those reptilian eyes. He'd seen it countless times in war, the weighing of pride against necessity. "What do you propose, Waitita?" the Krell finally asked. "I heal your companion," Linaya said. "In exchange, you guide us safely to the research district, and you tell us what you know about temple activity in the lower levels." The Krell leader's head tilted. "What makes you think we know anything about temple business?" "Krell scavengers see everything," she replied, "especially those clever enough to claim territory this strategic." A hissing sound emerged from the Krell, their version of laughter. "Their healer has teeth," the leader remarked, then nodded toward the kiosk. "Very well. Save Drex, and we have a deal." As Linaya moved to tend to the injured Krell, Jared kept his weapon ready, his eyes never leaving the leader. Ermina and Morella stayed close behind him, Cobalt growling softly at the unfamiliar sense. "Your human is protective," the Krell leader observed to Linaya. "Rare quality in this city." "He's not my human," Linaya replied, though her eyes briefly met Jared's, with an intensity that belied her words. "No?" The Krell's tongue flicked out again. "Your pheromones suggest otherwise." Jared felt heat rise to his face but maintained his stoic expression. Linaya, to her credit, remained focused on her patient, though a faint purple flush colored her cheeks. As she worked, the Krell leader moved closer to Jared, keeping a respectful distance from his weapon. "The temple has deployed something new in the lower levels," he said quietly. "A weapon designed for specific prey." "What kind of weapon?" Jared asked, though he already suspected the answer. The Krell's yellow eyes gleamed. "The kind that targets human genetic markers. They call it the Purge Protocol." The injured Krell, Drex, lay on a makeshift pallet as Linaya worked. His scaled skin had a sickly gray pallor, and black fluid leaked from puncture wounds along his torso. Jared had seen similar wounds before. Precision strikes designed to cause maximum internal damage while leaving the victim alive for questioning. Temple interrogation techniques, he muttered, kneeling beside Lanaya. Professional work. They wanted information, the Krell leader, who had introduced himself as Rex, confirmed. Drex was part of a salvage crew that discovered something in the old laboratory sectors. Something they weren't supposed to find. Lanaya's hands moved with practiced precision over the wounded Krell, her fingers occasionally glowing with residual energy despite the neural inhibitor. These wounds contain trace elements I recognize. Nanoprobes designed to extract information while causing maximum pain. What did they want to know? Jared asked Rex. Where he hid the sample. Drex's eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty. Healer, he rasped, recognizing Linnea. You shouldn't be here. They're looking for you. Save your strength, mate, she advised, but the Krell gripped her wrist with surprising force. No, you must know. The sample I took it's a prototype, human-specific pathogen. They're calling it Purge. Jared and Linnea exchanged glances. Where is this sample now? She asked. Drex's clawed hand moved to a pouch at his waist, extracting a small metallic cylinder. Inside. Stole it. Thought I could sell it. Didn't know what it was until they came for me. Linnea took the cylinder, examining it carefully. This could be invaluable. If I can analyze it, I might be able to develop a countermeasure. You'd need a lab, Jared pointed out. The research facility has everything I need, she replied. But first, I need to stabilize him. As Linnea continued her work, Jared noticed her movements becoming less fluid. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and the faint glow beneath her skin flickered erratically. The inhibitor is wearing off, he said quietly. And not gradually. She nodded, her breathing becoming labored. The modifications are fighting back harder than I anticipated. My body is rejecting the suppression. Can you finish? I have to, she said grimly, focusing on a particularly nasty wound. He has information we need, and I gave my word. Jared watched with growing concern as Linnea pushed herself, the color draining from her face with each passing minute. By the time she sealed the last of Drex's major wounds, she was swaying on her knees. He'll live, she announced, then collapsed against Jared's chest. Her skin burned against his, and the genetic modifications beneath her skin pulsed chaotically. Bright one moment, dim the next. Ermina rushed to her mother's side, panic in her young eyes. What's happening to her? Modification rejection syndrome, Rex observed dispassionately. Seen it before in escaped temple subjects. The artificial sequences are attacking her natural cells. Without stabilization, her own enhancements will kill her. What can we do? Jared demanded, cradling Linnea's trembling form. Rex's tongue flicked out thoughtfully. Lorellian physiology requires compatible genetic material to stabilize. Another healer would be ideal, but we don't have another healer, Jared snapped. No, Rex agreed, but you have something potentially more valuable. Human DNA has remarkable adaptive properties. It is why the temple covets it. A direct transfusion might stabilize her long enough to reach the facility. Jared didn't hesitate. How do we do this? The old way, Rex said, producing a wicked-looking blade. Blood to blood. Ermina stepped forward protectively. You can't be serious. Cross-species transfusion is dangerous. More dangerous than watching her die? Jared asked softly. The girl fell silent, her eyes moving between her mother and the human who had, against all odds, become their protector. Jared rolled up his sleeve. Do it! Rex prepared quickly, creating a small fire to sterilize his blade. The procedure was primitive but effective. A shallow cut on Jared's forearm, another on Linnea's, pressed together to allow direct blood flow between them. The moment their blood mingled, Jared felt a jolt like electricity coursing through his veins. Linnea's eyes flew open, locking with his in shared shock as something profound and inexplicable passed between them. Images flooded his mind, memories that weren't his own. A lavender-skinned child learning to heal her first patient. A young woman being inducted into the temple, filled with pride and purpose. The horror of discovering experimental chambers filled with human subjects. The desperate plan to steal research and escape with her daughters. And beneath it all, more recent impressions. The way she'd felt when he'd carried her to safety. The flutter in her chest when their hands touched. The growing warmth whenever their eyes met. From Lanaya's widened eyes, he knew she was experiencing something similar. Glimpses of his past, his feelings, his most private thoughts. "What's happening?" he managed to ask, his voice strained. "Genetic resonance," Rex explained, watching with fascination. "Your DNA is, communicating, adapting to each other." The process lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours, an intimacy beyond anything physical, a connection at the most fundamental level of their beings. When Rex finally separated their arms and bandaged the wounds, Jared felt strangely bereft, as if something essential had been disconnected. Lanaya sat up slowly, her color restored, and the modifications beneath her skin now pulsing with steady, controlled rhythm. Her eyes, when they met his, held a new depth of understanding. "I saw everything," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder and something else, a tenderness that made his heart race. "So did I," he admitted, suddenly feeling exposed in a way no physical vulnerability could match. She reached out, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with newfound familiarity. "Your battalion, your family. I felt your loss as if it were my own." "And I felt yours," he replied softly, "the weight of your responsibilities. Your love for your daughters, your courage." Around them, the others maintained a respectful distance, sensing the profound shift that had occurred. Even Rex seemed subdued, his usual reptilian pragmatism tempered by what he had witnessed. "The bond is temporary," he informed them, "but powerful. You share certain attributes now. Immunities, sensitivities." His tongue flicked out, tasting the air. "And awareness of each other." Morella approached cautiously, Cobalt at her heels. "Mom, are you better now?" Lanaya smiled, embracing her younger daughter. "Yes, little one, thanks to Jared." Ermina studied Jared with new eyes, wary but respectful. "You've shared blood with our mother. In Lorellian tradition, that makes you family." The implication hung in the air between them, laden with meaning Jared wasn't ready to examine. "We should move," he said instead, checking his tactical display. "The neural inhibitor may have failed, but with this bond, the temple's sensors might have trouble distinguishing Lanaya's signature from mine." "A natural cloaking effect," Lanaya agreed, standing with new strength. "And perhaps more. I can feel something else, a resistance to the pathogen." She held up the cylinder containing the purge sample. "Your natural immunity to Nexus fever seems to have transferred partially to me, and if I'm right, your blood might hold the key to neutralizing this weapon." Drex, now conscious and sitting upright, hissed softly, "The temple will hunt you both now. What you've done, sharing blood, it's forbidden knowledge, too powerful for them to allow." "Let them try," Jared said, a new determination hardening his voice as he helped Lanaya gather her things. The bond between them hummed like a live wire, electric and undeniable. For 15 years, he'd been a ghost in Port Nexus, surviving but not living. Now with Lanaya's blood mingling with his own, and her memories intertwined with his, he finally had something worth fighting for. "This passage hasn't been used in decades," Rex explained as he led them through a narrow maintenance shaft. "Bypasses the main security checkpoints between sectors." The tunnel was barely wide enough for Jared's shoulders, forcing them to move in single file. Drex, still weak but mobile, brought up the rear behind Ermina, Morella, and Cobalt. The little blue creature had proven surprisingly useful, its sensitive hearing alerting them to distant patrols twice already. "How much farther to the research facility?" Jared asked, his hand occasionally brushing against Lanaya's as they navigated the cramped space. Each touch sent a jolt of awareness through their newly formed bond. He could sense her fatigue, her determination, even flashes of her thoughts when their skin made contact. It was disorienting and exhilarating all at once. "2 more junctions," Rex replied, "but there's a complication." Of course there is, Jared thought, and felt Lanaya's silent amusement in response to his unspoken comment. "The most direct route passes near a temple testing ground," Rex continued. "Usually minimal activity, but our scouts reported increased movement there in recent days." "What kind of testing ground, Yumurshi?" Lanaya asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. "The kind where theories become weapons," Rex said grimly, "where subjects don't leave." The tunnel gradually widened into a junction chamber with multiple branching passages. Rex paused, consulting a crude map etched into a metal plate on his forearm. We go left, he decided. Stay quiet. Sound carries in these old ducts. They had traveled perhaps 50 meters when Cobalt suddenly froze. Ears perked forward, a low whine building in his throat. Morella quickly soothed the creature, but the warning was clear. Jared signaled for everyone to stop. Ahead, a ventilation grate provided a view into a vast chamber below. Moving cautiously, he and Linnea approached the opening. What they saw froze the blood in their veins. The chamber was a laboratory, sterile, white, and horrifying in its clinical efficiency. Transparent containment cells lined the walls, each holding a human subject in various states of distress. Medical equipment monitored their vital signs as a greenish gas was periodically released into their chambers. The purge protocol, Linnea whispered, her hand finding Jared's and gripping it tightly. They're testing delivery methods. Jared's jaw clenched as he scanned the prisoners, men and women in tattered EDF uniforms. His people, his comrades, supposedly lost years ago. The 82nd, he breathed. Some of them are still alive. Through their bond, Linnea felt the surge of rage and grief that threatened to overwhelm him. Her fingers tightened around his, anchoring him. We can help them, she said with quiet intensity. The sample Drex stole, combined with our bonded blood, I can synthesize a neutralizing agent. Even if you could, how would we distribute it? How would we free them? Jared demanded, though he kept his voice low. The ventilation system, Rex interjected, pointing to a control panel visible on the far side of the lab. It's designed to deliver the pathogen. It could deliver the cure just as effectively. Jared's tactical mind immediately began assessing angles, guard positions, potential weapons. It's heavily guarded, at least 6 temple security officers, plus whatever automated systems they have. 7, Linnea corrected, her enhanced vision picking out details he'd missed. And the lead researcher is High Priest Tarn. He knows me, knows what I can do. Jared felt her fear through their bond, but also her resolve. This man had been her mentor, then her jailer. The betrayal still cut deep. We need a distraction, Jared decided. Something to clear the room long enough for you to synthesize and deploy the neutralizing agent. I have an idea, Drex said, speaking up for the first time since they'd left the transit hub. But you won't like it. He was right. Jared didn't like it at all. But 20 minutes later, he found himself preparing to implement the desperate plan. This is insane, Ermina protested, as Linnea quickly mixed compounds from her medical kit with the contents of Drex's stolen sample. You can't go down there alone. He won't be alone, Linnea said, her eyes meeting Jared's with an intensity that made the air between them seem to crackle. I'll be with him, through the bond. She approached him, the newly synthesized compound in a small injector. This will temporarily enhance the properties of our shared blood. It should provide protection against the purge for about 15 minutes. Should? Jared raised an eyebrow. A smile tugged at her lips. Science is rarely certain, soldier. Comforting. Their banter belied the gravity of the moment. If they failed, they would die, and with them, any hope of exposing the temple's atrocities or saving the human prisoners. Linnea administered the injection, her touch lingering on his arm. But through their bond, he felt her fear for him, her admiration, and something deeper that neither of them had dared name. Be careful, she whispered, then impulsively pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief but electric, sending a surge of sensation through their bond that left them both breathless. In that moment, the barriers between them, human and Lyrelian, soldier and healer, survivor and fugitive, seemed to dissolve completely. Well, Jared said when they finally parted, his voice rougher than usual, that's certainly motivation to come back in one piece. Rex made a sound that might have been a snort. If you two are finished, we have a schedule to keep. With a final look at Linnea and the girls, Jared followed Drex and Rex to the access point they'd identified. The plan was simple in theory. Drex would trigger an alarm in an adjacent sector, drawing most of the security away. Jared would drop into the lab, secure the ventilation controls, and deploy Linnea's neutralizing agent. Rex would ensure their escape route remained clear. Simple, except for the part where everything could go catastrophically wrong. Remember, Drex said as they prepared to separate, humans are notoriously difficult to kill. It's why the temple fears you. It's why they created the purge. Is that supposed to be encouraging? Jared asked dryly. It's supposed to remind you what you're fighting for, the Krell replied. Your kind doesn't belong in cages. You're too unpredictable. With that dubious vote of confidence, Drex disappeared down a side passage to trigger the diversion. 3 minutes later, alarms blared throughout the facility. Jared watched through the grate as security personnel rushed from the lab, leaving only 2 guards and High Priest Tarn. Now or never, he muttered, and dropped silently into the laboratory. The first guard never saw him coming. The second managed to raise his weapon before Jared's combat knife found its mark. He moved with lethal efficiency. Years of training combined with the desperate knowledge that lives depended on his success. High Priest Tarn turned just as Jared reached the ventilation controls. The consortium official's eyes widened in shock and recognition. "Human!" he spat, reaching for an alarm panel. "How dare you contaminate this sacred space?" Jared's thrown knife pinned the priest's hand to the console, drawing a shriek of pain and outrage. "Sacred?" Jared growled, advancing on the alien. "You call torturing prisoners sacred?" Through the bond, he felt Linnea's presence, her knowledge guiding his fingers as he input the complex sequence to override the ventilation system. "You cannot comprehend our great work," Tarn hissed, his elongated features contorted with pain and hatred. "Humans are a plague, unpredictable, violent, spreading across the stars. The Purge is mercy compared to what your kind would unleash upon the galaxy." "Funny," Jared said as he connected the canister containing Linnea's neutralizing agent to the ventilation system. "From where I'm standing, you're the one who looks like a monster." As the neutralizing agent dispersed through the ventilation system, the human prisoners began to stir, their symptoms visibly receding. Tarn watched in horror as his life's work was undone before his eyes. "You've doomed us all," the priest snarled. "The consortium will never stop hunting you now." Jared felt a surge of satisfaction as he activated the cell release mechanism. Then they better bring an army. Facility self-destruct initiated. 15 minutes to complete system purge. The automated announcement echoed through the laboratory as warning lights bathed everything in pulsing crimson. Tarn's final act of defiance, a desperate attempt to bury his crimes along with the evidence. "You fool!" Jared grabbed the priest by his ornate collar. "You've killed everyone in this sector." Tarn's smile was serene despite the blood trickling from his wounded hand. A small price for purity. A thunderous explosion rocked the facility, sending equipment crashing to the floor. Through their bond, Jared felt Linnea's spike of fear, followed by her determined focus as she and the others descended into the laboratory. "We need to move," she said as soon as she reached him, her eyes quickly assessing the freed human prisoners. 23 survivors of the 82nd Battalion. Weakened but mobile, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and fierce determination. "The research facility?" Jared asked. "No time," Linnea replied grimly. "The self-destruct sequence will trigger a chain reaction through all connected sectors. We need to get off-world." "With what ship?" one of the freed soldiers demanded, a woman with captain's insignia and hard eyes that had seen too much suffering. "The consortium controls all transit." Rex hissed softly, his reptilian features twisting into what might have been a smile. "Not all transit. The temple keeps a private shuttle bay for special deliveries." "Can you get us there?" Jared asked. "For the right price." Jared's hand moved to his weapon, but Linnea placed a restraining touch on his arm. Through their bond flowed her understanding of Krell psychology, respect earned through strength, loyalty through mutual benefit. "Your life is in price enough, she asked Rex calmly. The Krell's tongue flicked out, tasting the tension in the air. "Fair point, healer." Another explosion, closer this time. Dust rained from the ceiling. 14 minutes to complete system purge. They moved as one cohesive unit, Jared and the soldiers taking point and rear guard, Linnea and her daughters in the protected center with Drax and Rex guiding the way. Cobalt trotted alongside Morella, no longer the trembling creature from the alley, but alert and protective. The corridors became a blur of emergency lighting and blaring alarms. Twice they encountered temple security, but the combined force of desperate humans and their unlikely allies made short work of the opposition. "The research," Linnea said as they paused at a junction, her voice tight with regret. "Years of work, evidence that could have exposed them." Your daughters are alive, Jared reminded her, his hand finding hers in the chaos. We're alive. Sometimes that's victory enough. Through their bond, he felt her gratitude for his understanding and something deeper, a warmth that transcended their biological connection. 10 minutes to complete system purge. The shuttle bay was a sleek, modern facility that contrasted sharply with the utilitarian corridors they'd traversed. 3 vessels sat on launch pads, small, fast courier ships designed for discreet transport. Consortium military grade, the captain of the 82nd noted with professional appreciation. Those babies can outrun anything in this sector. And they're locked down tight, Drex observed, examining the security console. Biometric protocols. All eyes turned to their captive. High Priest Tarn glared back with undisguised contempt. I would rather die than help you escape, he spat. Jared stepped forward, but Linnea placed a hand on his chest, stopping him. Her eyes never left Tarn's face as she spoke. You taught me many things, Master Tarn, she said, her voice carrying an edge he'd never heard before, including how to bypass security protocols. She approached the console, her fingers moving with practiced precision across the interface. Through their bond, Jared felt her concentration, her methodical dismantling of the system's defenses. 7 minutes to complete system purge. Got it, she announced as the nearest shuttle's boarding ramp descended with a pneumatic hiss. Everyone aboard. They moved quickly, the soldiers helping their weaker comrades, while Rex and Drex secured the perimeter. As Ermina guided Morella up the ramp, Cobalt at their heels, Jared turned to find Linnea still at the console. What are you doing? He demanded. We need to go. One moment, she replied, her fingers flying across the interface. Downloading what I can from the central database. It's not everything, but it's something. A data crystal ejected from the console, which she pocketed with grim satisfaction. 5 minutes to complete system purge. Inside the shuttle, organized chaos reigned as the soldiers prepared for launch. The captain, Henderson, she'd introduced herself, had taken the pilot's seat, her military training evident in her efficient pre-flight checks. We've got company, she announced, nodding toward the external monitors. Temple security forces were assembling outside the bay doors, setting up heavy weapons. Can we blast through? Jared asked. Not without risking hull damage, Henderson replied. We need those doors open before we can launch. Linnea studied the shuttle bay controls. I can open them from here, but someone needs to hold the override. The implication hung in the air between them. A manual override meant someone staying behind. I'll do it, Rex said unexpectedly. My people have a debt to settle with the temple. This seems fitting. You'll die, Jared stated flatly. The Krell's tongue flicked out in what might have been amusement. Perhaps. We are hardier than you mammals give us credit for. 3 minutes to complete system purge. Drex clasped forearms with his leader in a warrior's farewell. Hunt well in the Shadowlands, brother. And you in the sun? Rex replied before turning to Jared and Linnea. Your bond is rare. In the old stories, such connections reshape worlds. With that cryptic statement, he was gone, slipping through the shuttle doors before they sealed. Everyone, secure, Henderson called out. This might get rough. On the monitors, they watched as Rex reached the bay control station. Temple security opened fire, but the Krell moved with surprising speed, dodging energy blasts as he activated the override. The massive bay doors began to slide open, revealing the night sky of Port Nexus, a canvas of industrial smog pierced by distant stars. 2 minutes to complete system purge. He did it, Ermina whispered as the shuttle's engines roared to life. The Temple forces concentrated their fire on Rex, who held the override with dogged determination despite multiple hits. As the shuttle lifted off, the Krell looked directly into the external camera and bared his teeth in what could only be described as a grin. They shot through the opening doors just as the first major structural collapse began, the shuttle's engines screaming as Henderson pushed them to maximum thrust. Behind them, Port Nexus's research sector erupted in a series of explosions that lit up the night sky. We made it, Morella breathed, her young face pressed to a viewport as they climbed higher, the city's lights shrinking beneath them. Not yet, Henderson cautioned. Consortium patrol vessels will be scrambled any minute. We need to reach jump distance. The next 20 minutes were a masterclass in evasive piloting as Henderson guided the shuttle through Port Nexus's defensive grid. Twice they nearly collided with patrol ships, and once they had to skim dangerously close to the planet's atmosphere to avoid detection. But finally, the navigation computer chimed. They had reached safe jump distance. "Where to, Captain?" Henderson asked, glancing back at Jared and Lanaya. The question hung in the air. For 15 years, Jared had been trapped on this world, his dreams of home abandoned. Now, suddenly, freedom stretched before him, a galaxy of possibilities. He looked at Linnea, feeling through their bond her own uncertainty. Her entire life had been the temple, then running from it. What would freedom mean for her? "Earth," he said finally, "we take this evidence to Earth Command. With the survivors' testimony and Linnea's data, we can expose the consortium's crimes." "And then?" Linnea asked softly, her hand finding his. Jared interlaced his fingers with hers, the lavender of her skin contrasting with his sun-darkened tone. "And then we find a place where your daughters can grow up without fear, where Cobalt can get fat on real food, not scraps, where you and I can—" He trailed off, suddenly aware of the many eyes upon them. Through their bond, he felt her amusement at his discomfort and her deep affection that mirrored his own. "Jump calculations complete," Henderson announced. "Everyone hang on. First jump in 3, 2, 1. The stars outside the viewport stretched into lines of light as the shuttle leapt into hyperspace, carrying them away from Port Nexus and toward a future none of them could have imagined mere days ago. In the quiet moments that followed, as the freed prisoners settled in for the long journey and Ermina and Mirella finally succumbed to exhaustion, Jared found himself alone with Linnea in the shuttle's small medical bay. "Your fever's completely gone," he observed as she checked her vital signs on the medical scanner. "Thanks to you," she replied. "Our bond did more than just stabilize my modifications. It's changing them, integrating them more naturally with my system." "Is that good or bad?" "Good, I think. The temple designed the modifications to make us dependent on them for stability. Now," she smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face, "now I'm free, truly free." Jared stepped closer, drawn by something more powerful than the biological bond they shared. "And what will you do with that freedom?" Her eyes met his, deep blue against earth brown. "I was hoping we might figure that out together." The kiss that followed was nothing like their hurried exchange in the tunnels. This was slow, deliberate, an exploration and a promise. Through their bond flowed emotions, too complex for words: gratitude, desire, respect, and the tentative beginnings of love. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, Jared rested his forehead against hers. "You know, when I found you in that alley, I was just trying to help a sick woman and her hungry pet." Linnea laughed softly, the sound like music after so much danger and fear. "And look what happened next." "Yeah," Jared agreed, pulling her closer as the shuttle carried them toward Earth and whatever future awaited. "Look what happened next."